Good morning. Campbell McCrary here from Amvest Capital in New York City. Welcome to the Amvest Capital Inc. live webinar with Cassiar Gold Corp. Cassiar trades on the venture as GLDC and on the OTCQB as CGLCF. We hope you'll enjoy today's program. It will also be available in replay mode. Do feel free to chat in your questions in the question pane of GoToWebinar. Simply email them in and we'll try and ask them in real time. Amvest is a New York-based specialist investment management and corporate finance firm focused solely on the natural resource sector. This video will be available for on-demand replay about an hour after we wrap up today, and you can find it at amvestcapital.com/webinars. And we hope after you've watched the show, you'll send us some good feedback. And during the show, any questions would be fantastic. Have with us today, not one, but two gentlemen from Cassiar, Marco Rock and David Reese. Marco making you the presenter. Marco Rock, CEO and director, private banker and commodity specialist by background, and is a co-founder of Rain, a silver and Arabian Shield Resources, and is a CFA charter holder. Dave Reese, technical advisor, is a consulting geologist with more than 25 years of experience in the mining industry. Dave has conducted direct field-based geological studies on deposits which collectively contain between 600 million to 2 billion ounces of silver, including deposits in the Carlin Trend, the Abitibi Greenstone Belt. Again, following the presentation, we'll be asking questions of management, and we hope to entertain your questions as well. So Dave and Marco, if you would turn on your webcams, we'll dig in.
Sounds good. Thank you, Campbell.
Dave?
Yeah, I think I'm
okay.
Got it. Here we go.
All right.
Is that it now?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Campbell, and thank you everyone for tuning in. So I'll just going to be doing a small intro about the company, and then I'll pass it over to Dave, who's going to be talking a lot about the exploration potential that we have at Cassiar. So Cassiar Gold is a Canadian gold explorer, and we're looking to build the next multi-million ounce gold camp in BC. I'll going to be asking your attention for the cautionary and forward-looking statements, which we will be making today. So in a nutshell, basically Cassiar Gold is located in our flagship. Cassiar Gold is located in northern BC, and there's really 5 things it's very important for people to retain. One is that we have a tremendous exploration potential. We control the Cassiar District, which is a 56,000 hectare land package, where we have a very prospective 15-kilometer belt with targets in and around it. We are undergoing a drilling program this year, 15,000 meters, which we will start very, very soon in early June. And we're very, very excited to start that, and that's going to be providing tremendous news flow in the coming months. We have truly a world-class team, names like Doug Kerwin, Steve Ladwin, David Reese, which is with us today, or James Maxwell, Steve Robertson, just to name a few. We also are located in a very safe jurisdiction with existing infrastructure, so located in northern BC, which actually been staged to really interesting M&A over the last few weeks, months, and very interesting developments with, for example, GT Gold, which is just 200 kilometers south of us, which is next to Red Chris as well. So we do have quite a bit of infrastructure. We have Highway 37 bisecting our property. We have a permitted 300 ton per day mill. We have 30 people camp. We have 600,000 tons of tailings. We have mine permits. So we feel very good about our jurisdiction and the infrastructure that we have. And on that exploration potential, we already have a 1 million ounce plus resource at 1.43 grams per ton. This is a near surface flat-lying resource, which is open in multiple directions. This is a 2019 resource, which we already successfully drilled last year. And basically expanded the envelope of mineralization, and Dave Reese is going to talk a little bit more about that. Just very quickly, just before I pass the word to David Reese, we have a very, very healthy board, management, and advisor and insider ownership, with nearly 35% of the shares being held by this group, and also we have a very healthy institutional shareholder base. Our price per share last time I saw was 45 cents. That's a market cap of 24.3 million Canadian, with over 5 million in the bank. That's a tremendous enterprise value, per ounce. It's a very great, it's a great opportunity to come in. Insiders and myself are buying as we speak on the markets. So do have a look, and maybe I'll just pass it over to Dave, who is the man of the hour, and hopefully he can make you as excited as he made me, and tell you a little bit more about what we have and what's our potential. Over to you, Dave.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for the introduction, Marco. It's a pleasure to be working with the team, and I'm impressed with everyone on it. We have an incredible group of people for experience and a great geology team. So I'm very optimistic about this summer. And our latest board member to join, Steve Robertson, has a lot of experience in the area through his work with Imperial Metals. So we have a great new link to the community in this experience that Steve has in the area too. So I'm going to tell you, I'm a geologist, so I have technical aspects to this presentation I'm going to go through, but it's really the technical aspects that give you the perspective on why this district is so prospective. And here's a map of British Columbia showing Cassiar at the upper part here. And let me just, can you see my cursor there? I'm circling the northern part of the screen.
Yep.
And so the Cassiar district is one of 2 orogenic gold districts in British Columbia. It's an inner one. It shares the same belt as with the Caribou district down to the southeast here, which has several million ounces in historical production and resources, and the Sheep Creek district down to the southeast here, which is also owned by Cassiar Gold, which has historically produced about 0.7 million ounces of gold. And there's a second belt of orogenic gold deposits in British Columbia on the coast here, the Juneau district, all the way down through the Braylor and Pioneer area. So these deposits are very much like what you'd find in the Abitibi Greenstone belt. We call them orogenic gold systems. They are the most common type of gold deposit that is the source of global gold current production, that is. So there's a lot of similarities to Abitibi, to Western Africa and Western Australia in the style of the deposits. So if we now focus in on the Cassiar project, just to give you a perspective on one of the reasons why it is so favorable, is access is a huge part of this. You can see this red line running through the middle of the property is the Stewart-Cassiar Highway. It's paved all the way through here, and all the little red lines on the maps are roads, and you can see that all the deposits and prospects shown on the map are accessible by these roads. The other remarkable thing is that the company owns an entire mining district. So what you see within this area is about 25 by 25 kilometer contiguous property, very large land position, which contains an entire mining district. And this district has historically produced about 350,000 ounces of gold from these deposits you see on here. These are quite high grade. You can see the grades here of production in lower left range between about 10 and 20 grams typically. And these are mainly for deposits in the southern part of the district, South Cassiar area. And we also have the Taurus deposit up here, which Taurus had some historical underground production, but is mainly a larger bulk tonnage target in which, as Marco was indicating, has more than 1 million ounces of gold in resources. So that deposit plus all these other targets around here collectively form the path going forward for Cassiar to identify higher grade down on the South Cassiar area and use that to potentially augment low-grade mineralization in bulk tonnage areas in the northern part of the property. So a lot of the historical production here goes back to the 1990s, 1980s and 90s. So the underground workings here that produced a lot of this gold would be easily accessible and rehabilitated. And in fact, just here you can see right on the map, there's the mill facility is right central, right connected with all the road systems here. And that mill facility is a 300 ton per day mill with a permitted tailings pond, which could be refurbished and reopened relatively easily. So inside the property, you can see that most of the deposits and prospects are in about a 15-kilometer long trend, which is linear, northerly trending. But there are other prospects you can see out to the east here and to the northwest here, which lie outside that. And I'll show you geologically why we feel there's potential for other trends parallel to this central one in the middle here to really give high prospectivity of the property. Here's a view looking south from a northern ridge in the northern part of the property. So we're looking southward where the Taurus deposit here. Here's the South Cassiar area where the historical mines were down to the south. And you can see the really forgiving nature of the terrain compared to other parts of British Columbia. This is really easy ground to get around. It's very accessible. The paved Cassiar Road is down through here. The Stewart Cassiar Highway runs just through the distance here, almost where this orange line is. And all of the prospects and deposits are accessible by road or very close to road, including the Taurus deposit down in the valley here. This is the bulk tonnage target, and you can see from a mining sense, it would be a very, very easy proposition. And as Marco indicated, quite shallow. To the lower left is the mill, which is up in the central part of the property here. You can see this is the 300 ton per day mill with permitted tailings. Of course, if you were putting a bulk tonnage deposit into production, you would need to expand that, but you have a very good working base to start with, and you have the potential also to early on produce from higher grade veins individually if that was an option that was preferred. So if we now look at the geology, I am a geologist, so forgive me for the geology that's coming up here, but again, it's important to understand the perspective of the property and its exploration potential. So you can see here on the left a geological map of the area. We're in an area called the Sylvester Allochthon. These are mafic volcanic rocks, seafloor rocks that are what we'd call abducted into an area between the Cache Creek terrain and the Cassiar terrain here. So these are classic rocks for hosting orogenic gold systems. It's a sequence of mafic volcanic rocks that are gently dipping, interlayered with ultramafic units and sediments. And those sediments and ultramafic units that are interlayered with the mafic volcanics act as weaknesses. These are weak rocks. The ultramafic rocks often alter to talc, which is very weak, and it allows shear zones to propagate along those rock units and allows then the mafic volcanic units in between to fracture and for veins to form within them. And if we look at some of these rock units, you can see in the upper center here, these are some of the pillowed mafic volcanics. These are the host units to the veins. And if anybody's watching Iceland right now, these are the same types of rocks, of course, that are forming there in the volcanic eruptions. And those are interlayered with these green units here. This is what we call listwonite. This is your ultramafic units. It alters to a mineral called fuchsite or mariposite, very famous from Mariposa County in California, so it has a very close association with other orogenic districts. And interlayered with the listwonite ore on its own in between the mafic volcanic rocks, we have these sediments, which again, these are fine grained rocks. They're quite weak from a structural sense, so they allow shear zones and faults to form along them, which then again feed across some of these rock units, across the mafic units, to allow the veins to form. You can see in the upper left here the main trend. The veins are trending east-northeast. These are all the little red lines you see on here. So they're going parallel to what I'm drawing here. And so the veins are trending east-northeast. The overall trend is north-northwest. And that trend, you can see there of the main veins, that trend is parallel to a lineation. Now, this is important. Again, geologically, this is a technical aspect, but it's very important in understanding why the veins are where they are. Essentially, what we are is in a belt which underwent mountain building about 120 million years ago. And during late stages of that, we had these rocks that you see down here, which are on the ridges, thrust over a lot of the rock units that you see lower down here. And in doing that, the transportation direction of the thrusting was parallel to this lineation. And you can see the veins form perpendicular to that. The veins are extending in response to that northwest trend that you're seeing there. So here's a little model for this. This is part of a study that I was involved with a few years ago. And you can see north is to the right in this block model. And you can see how the transportation of the rocks above over the rocks below. These rocks in green are the mafic volcanic rocks. The rocks in purple are the ultramafics, which are weak, localizing shear zones along them during this top to the northwest transport. And in the mafic volcanic rocks, we have the veins in red here forming as essentially as linkage features across the mafic volcanic units. So what you see apparent right here is a huge part of the exploration premise is that every time we get a band of these mafic volcanic rocks, we have potential for new veins to form blind underneath rocks above. And this is the setting of the mines that have been historically mined in the district. So essentially you can see this gray material on top. These are sediments, which on the lower left, you can see are outcropping in parts of the property here, which obscure the target areas below. So you can see all the prospects and veins here lie in areas where the green units are exposed. In other words, they were found at surface. So there's nothing to say that these vein systems will not continue underneath these rocks down in through here, or in other layers beneath where the veins have already been found. And you can see in lower center, there's that lineation, and you can see these fractures here in this pattern. This is parallel to the vein trend. So this is exactly the pattern we see here. So just keep that geometry in mind. It is the geometry that tells us how to find the veins on the property. And here's a cross-sectional schematic view showing exactly that from south on the left to north on the right. The Taurus deposit is down in the middle here in the lower part of the valley. The South Cassiar area with its veins and historical underground workings is up here on the ridge here. And you can see how the veins that are historically produced, which are in blue, are essentially sitting between these panels in purple of the ultramafic and the sediments. And in the dashed red lines are areas we have targets that lie underneath. And you can see in all of these areas, we have potential for stacking of mineralized zones in each location. And we have a lot of evidence for that stacking in the historical mining and in the fact that all the way up to the ridge top here, we have veins in the Lucky deposit all the way down to Taurus. So topographically, over a kilometer vertically, 2 kilometers vertically, we have the stacking of all these veins. And most of these types of targets have never been explored for. So if we look historically at what was mined here, this gives us a good idea, obviously, of what we're looking for. You can see in the upper right here, this is the area of the main mine in the South Cassiar area, which would produce most of the gold in the historical underground, 150,000 ounces approximately produced at over 15 to 20 grams per ton. And those veins looked like you see down in the lower left here. These are classic, what we'd call orogenic gold systems. They're quartz veins. They have some low levels of sulfides in them, mainly pyrite, a little bit of tetrahedrite, a little bit of arsenopyrite, and you can see they have visible gold. So these veins were very high grade. We have the potential for very, very high grades over narrow intervals in some of these areas. And geologically, if you follow the Beta Hunt mine from where there was recently some very, very high grade extracted in Western Australia, Cassiar is very similar geologically to that, in that it's got these flat lying mafic volcanic rocks with ultramafics in between and extremely high grades up near the contact area where the veins intersect the contact between the ultramafics and the mafic rocks, which is what you see at the Beta Hunt mine as well. So in this area, you can see there was historical mining in the Bain Vein, and in the lower left, we see the Cassiar and Bain Vein systems. There's also historical resources still existing in these mines, which add up, you can see in the main mine, to about 13,000 tons of 20 grams, and in the Bain and Cassiar areas between about 30 and another 20,000 tons here at quite high grades. So these are small resources, but these veins are largely open laterally, and there is potential, as mentioned, for parallel veins and stacked veins, which we'll look at. So here you have a block diagram in the main mine where you can see a cross section looking westerly, and you can see that same stacking I was talking about. This area in the purple here, this is the ultramafic units. You can see in the purple here, there's 2 of them, and there's green mafic volcanics in between. You see how the veins like the mafic volcanics, and there's one mafic volcanic band here with a vein in it. Stacking downward, there's more veins underneath. So there's your stacking right there, which gives us that geometry that we see in the lower left here. So these were historically mined veins. Extensions of these still have exploration potential, but we again have potential for parallel veins all through here. Here's what some of the veins look like. You can see in the lower left, this is the Bain Vein, beautiful, typical quartz vein, shear vein system, we'd call it. It's in a fault, it's had displacement across it. It gets these vein arrays beside it, like you see here in the middle picture, which increase its width with gold-bearing potential around it as well. And in the right here, we see another kind of vein. This is the type of vein that follows along those low angle thrusts I was showing you. It's called the Volog vein. This was historically mined as well. And so we have potential directly along those structures for these types of veins as well. Here's an example of how these veins form. The low angle thrusts that you can see here, top to the northeast or northwest displacement, you can see will link over downwards. This is a small scale version and underground working of what's happening. We'll link over downward and splay downward as off the tip of the thrust, extending down to the mafic volcanic rocks. So if we scale this upward, this is the kind of target we're looking for, with bulk zones that can occur in upper tips of some of these veins, focusing downward to higher grade veins at depth. There's a lot of visible gold, as I mentioned. It's often occurring, obviously it's free gold, it's native gold, occurring along these bands in the veins and through here. So really provides very good potential for very high grade areas over small distances. In the main mine area here, you can see on the right, there's the outlines of some of the historically mined veins. The pink are some of the drill holes. You can see how the drilling is very concentrated around the historical mine, even though you can see these patterns of drilling are outlining veins which extend beyond the area of historical mining. So these veins, in most cases, are not mined when you're outside of this central area. You can see here some of the targets. There's the Bear and Divine veins. Extend outward to the east of the underground workings. And then we have other targets you can see in cross section here, for example, where we're looking west again, where you can see veins here which are not fully mined, and also below potential for stacked veins, just as we saw in that other diagram earlier on in the main mine area, where the stacking of the veins is occurring beneath these sediments and ultramafic units and other mafic units below. As we move further south, here we were looking at the main mine. If we move south here to, this is the hot vein system over here, which has never been mined. The hot veins only been drilled very shallowly, but has the potential again to cut across that mafic volcanic sequence in through here. So this is a target that will be drilled this coming year. And similarly, this Volog vein I mentioned to you, which is along one of these thrust surfaces, you can see there's a deflection in the contact where it occurs. These shapes and changes in the contact area, just as you see in the hot vein, provide us indications of where veins will splay off underneath. So modeling this contact gives us a very good targeting tool for looking for where the veins lie underneath. And similarly here, just like we saw in the main vein, the Volog has the potential to splay below into the mafic volcanics underneath this ultramafic unit for a target beneath here, which has never been tested. So there are many targets like this we have here. Obviously, not all of them will work out, but there's enough of them that some will clearly do so. And so we have many targets around here that we can test for these types of mineralization. Moving further south to the Cassiar and Bain areas, it's the same geology. You can see here in the plan view, all the different veins, how we get parallel sets of veins. If you have one, you'll often have 2 or 3 others parallel to it. And on the right-hand side here, you can see, again, a cross-section with the ultramafic units above and sediments above, mafics below, how the vein is splaying right off that contact at an inflection. Same kind of a pattern. The red areas in here are more vein material, which are unmined, lying out in through here. Some of these have intercepts of 10 to 20 grams per ton, so these become additional targets out beyond the historical workings. The Bain vein system here further to the south, very similar. The underground workings here you see mined a portion of it only. This area to the east is future potential underground development, is not being developed. This is entirely in resources. And to the west here, we have more mineralization in resources. But again, all along strike here, we have potential for extensions. You can see the drilling gets very widely spaced out through here. And there is open mineralized hits here that are over 50 to 80 grams per ton in some of these areas. And here you see the underground portal for the Bain Vein system. This is active as recently as 10 years ago, and so could be easily opened and rehabilitated to get underground. And here's one of the historical stopes looking into, you can see the vein system here, classic orogenic gold vein system. Here's some of the targets in the Bain to Cassiar area. Again, we have the same kinds of targets as the main vein, potential for stacked vein systems beneath, potential for parallel veins, particularly in this area between the Cassiar and the Bain vein systems here, where there's very, very little drilling. You see the drilling that here is actually quite widely spaced. This is a very wide cross section, so these holes are very widely spaced. And we have also some hits in these areas. Plus, we have potential beneath this band of sediments for additional veins below. And then a very large gap on a bigger scale between the main mine and the Cassiar mine in through here, where we have the sediments, this so-called argillite cap here you see on the ridge top. So this is a cross section looking west. And this blind area underneath where there's been no drilling, we have the potential, you can see the periodicity of these veins for potentially other veins to occur in this area here. And ideally, it'd be wonderful to be able to set up a drill rig, for example, in the underground workings here, and just drill a horizontal hole across here looking for veins. And that may well be the kind of targeting we might want to try in the future to most efficiently test an area like that. If we move to the north now, I'll show you the main Taurus deposit up here in the northern part of the property. Taurus, as Marco indicated, has a resource of over 1 million ounces of gold. Here's at the 0.7 gram per ton cutoff threshold. You can see it's a 21.8 million ton resource at 1.43 grams per ton. So this is of a similar setting to the veins we just saw on the South Cassiar area, but the mineralization style is a little bit different. It's more of a bulk style. We have a lot more of those smaller sheeted veins that I showed you could splay off the high-grade veins, which together form bulk zones with the alteration around them. And we have some higher grade veins internal to that, but collectively they form bulk zones close to surface. Here in plan view, you can see the area extent of the Taurus deposit. In lower right is the outline of where the drilling has occurred. You can see it's a 500 by 200 meter grid. So this is about a 2 kilometer wide area of the resource, but it is almost completely open laterally in all directions. You can see where the drilling has occurred largely due to ease of access off roads. And in the highway zone, for example, you can see the colors here are the traces of gold grades on drill holes. And those come right to the edge of the drilling, this whole area to the north. In fact, that area in the upper right, that image I'm showing in the upper right there, is of veins with alteration and outcrop just to the north of the highway zone here in an area that has never been tested by drilling. So this resource could easily be expanded outward, and particularly to the north and to the south and across in the area around the Taurus historical underground mine over and through here. You can see the trends of these veins are east-northeast, so we have a good idea of their controls. And also on the west side here, we see this north-south trending line here. This is the Taurus West Fault, which is a zone of mineralization which extends north-south here and has some very broad areas of good grade associated with it. And it's a principal area to upgrade in this region. So here's some of the mineralization styles at Taurus. You can see there's a little old test portal here. It went underground. You can see along some of the veins here from these sheeted sets. So these areas like you see around the portal here, which can get much wider than this too, form these bulk zones of between 1 and 4 grams per ton gold. With a lot of the gold hosted in the veins. You can see some visible gold here, more visible gold here, but also in the wall rock around the veins, you see this pyrite on the margins of the veins, which is also gold bearing. And in plan view, this is an area that Hawthorne Gold, a predecessor to Cassiar, stripped off in surface outcrop. You see the scale there, 20 meters is about 100 meters long. These are some of the vein systems, the fault-hosted vein systems that are controlling the mineralization in Taurus. And you can see how they trend dominantly northwest, but have these areas in pink, which are lots of smaller veins, which splay off them. And you can see some of the veins shown in some of the images here. Here's one of the little shear zones, the one running through here with some of the extensional veins splaying off it. So collectively, these form the bulk zones. And in longitudinal section, looking to the north, you can see that just like we saw at South Cassiar, the mineralization here that's near surface, you can see it's within 100 meters of surface. A lot of this mineralization is very close to surface, is sitting in a flat-lying mafic volcanic unit within brown underlying sedimentary rocks, which again have more mafic units beneath, giving you that potential for stacking. But I'm going to show you over here now on the west side. This is this Taurus West Shear I was mentioning, this north-south trending feature, which has some very broad intercepts along it and a slightly different style of mineralization in some areas, which you can see in the upper right is this more disseminated pyrite. For those who know the Barkerville District, this has some analogies to the Bonanza Ledge Zone. And it is associated with quartz-rich shear zones along its basal portion that are localizing along some sedimentary units, which also contain gold mineralization. So this is a broad mineralized zone with a lot of veins that come off the top of it. And it's very broadly drilled in some areas. Here it is in longitudinal section, looking to the west. This is the Taurus West Zone. Here's the underlying sediments. Here's that plunge of mineralization to the south, what we see in it, with some broad intercepts. There's 2.4 grams, for example, over 84 meters here. In the area in the red outline is the resource, so that lies just on the edge of the resource. 2 grams over 40 meters here, 2.2 over 38, 1.8 over 33. Some very broad intercepts in here. All these other holes have intercepts in them too. We're just looking at some of the highlights in through here. And there's more highlights you can see in lower left here, and you can refer to some of those on the company's disclosure as well. But you can see the targets here. There's a lot of big gaps in the drilling here. And this is, again, this is a broad section over about 100 meters wide. So even though those holes look closely spaced, a lot of those are actually more than 50 meters to 80 meters apart. So there's a lot of room to be drilled in between and through here to follow up some of this historical drilling. And you can see that the mineralization is completely open down plunge. There's no drilling down to the south here. So some of the targeting this year will look at extending that southward and similarly infilling in this area up and through here. In plan view, this is just some of the highlights that were done with some of the drilling last year in the Taurus area is infill drilling or step out drilling or confirmatory drilling. And you can see some of the intercepts in here. So you can see, for example, there was an intercept 18 meters at 5.43 grams per ton. So with the drill spacing, again, this is a very large area. You can see this 400 meters here. A lot of these holes are spaced at 50 meters or more apart. There's potential to follow out areas of higher grade like this, 18 meters at 5.43 grams per ton, and to find higher grade cores within this deposit, which obviously would be the focus of your resource, and also has the potential, if the mineralization plunges further south and gets deeper, to form bulk zones that could be mined selectively underground. And given that this mineralization is open laterally in almost all directions, we have potential to define such zones in other areas to upgrade this resource both in grade and in ounces. And here is a drilling plan for this year, where we can see it's steps at a time. We're looking at the west side where we have that high grade plunging zone right through here with some step out holes, some infill holes here. We have some more infill holes in the higher grade portions of the resource in the middle here to try and track out those higher grade areas. And we have to the north and south holes to test for those lateral extensions of mineralization. And over to the east, we have also holes to test for mineralization in the old historic area of the underground mines. So other targets in the property, you can see we've talked about Taurus, we've talked about the main mine. Just to the east of Taurus in the Snow Creek area is an area that looks very much like Taurus, which has seen very little exploration. You can see these sheeted veins again of the rusty altered wall rock in between with the pyrite envelopes on the veins. Lots of little sets of veins potentially forming bulk zones. You can see in the lower right here, almost no drill testing in here. This area may be a little bit higher up in the stratigraphy too. There's the lucky target on the ridge up through here, which we were looking at the photo from earlier, which I'll show you a slide of. And there's other targets all through the area here, which really have seen very little testing. So this is a very target-rich environment. Here's the Lucky prospect to the north, way up on the ridgetop, again, giving us that vertical stacking. There's the Taurus deposit down in the valley in the middle here. Lucky's almost a kilometer higher above that and still has all of those veins. You can see a view of one of the ridges in the Lucky area, how you can see the veins in the mafic volcanics forming these zones, just like we saw in the main mine, but way up on the ridge in areas that have seen little or no testing. And when we look at other targets, here you can see there's Taurus, there's the South Cassiar area down here. In between, we have what we talked about, Snow Creek. Lucky's just off the map here. We have Wings Canyon, which is an area of incredible quartz veining that had placer production along the creek. The veins, these big veins don't all carry gold, but there are veins in between them. There's particularly ones like you see in the bottom part of the image here, which is like banding in them, which are gold bearing. And so we have the potential for bulk zones near surface in through here. We also have areas like in the lower right part of this map, this Hunter vein system here, which is shown in the far right. This is a vein system very much like we saw in the underground workings in the main mine. High grade, there's visible gold in this outcrop here, but you'll see where it sits. I'll point out to you this brown unit here. These are sediments. It is sitting in a little window underneath the sediments in a mafic volcanic area. So these veins have the potential to extend underneath those sediments and form another zone that could step northward. Those lines of delineation, so you could have more veins parallel extending right underneath the sedimentary area away from these higher grade veins. So very little testing in that area. The New Coast prospect you see over and through here is very much like Taurus, sheeted veins with disseminated mineralization. Lots of targets like this you see in these little red areas in between here, which form a great base for following up and finding additional zones. And because they're all together and closely spaced, even if you find smaller zones, collectively, they can all feed into a larger operation. So in summary then, this is a huge land position, 100% owned by the company. It's a 25 by 25 kilometer block that encompasses an entire mining district. The South Cassiar area is of course where the higher grades are, where there's been a significant historical production with visible gold. It's similar in style to some of the vein systems you see in the Barkerville District. There's an analogy here to Fosterville here too, where we have such very high grade. The North Cassiar area here, you can see it hosts the Taurus deposit, which is our bulk zone with lots of potential to expand and to infill to find high-grade mineralization corridors along that in a near-surface environment. And then many other targets that lie around this area that will be also explored this year. The program for this summer is planned to be a 15,000 meter drilling campaign with about 25 to 30% of that focused in the Taurus area, but all the rest focusing in on some of these higher grade targets to the south to really try and track out some of those high grade veins and look for potential for new ones in stacked zones. And of course, we have this great infrastructure on the property with a permitted mill, a paved road right through the middle of it. We don't have to use helicopters here like you have to in the rest of BC. So it makes it very, very easy to explore, and permits are currently being received right now for the exploration programs this summer. So there we go. That's the overview for you. And I hope I didn't go too fast and that it made sense and provided you a good perspective on why we're excited about this property.
Excellent. Certainly thorough, and your excitement exudes throughout your presentation. have a bunch of questions being sent in. Everyone else, please send in some more questions. Always makes for a better show. You know, why can't drilling start sooner?
Well,
Because
there are restrictions from a permitting sense
yeah.
on that, wildlife restrictions and also snow conditions in the area. So so essentially the project is permitted essentially to explore in the summertime. There are migrating animals in the area, and there are also trap lines in this area by some of the Aboriginal community here who we want obviously to not disturb. And
Mhm.
so there are reasons why the summer drilling is favorable anyway, from the point of view that there is no snow in this area too, and the access is much better.
Could the mill start producing? Could you make some cash flow out of that on a sort of sooner than later
It
basis?
would need some refurbishment. I don't know what the status is now, but and I was up there a few years back with the predecessor Hawthorne Gold. They were restarting that mill right at that time, so the mill was in operational condition 10 years ago. So I would imagine that it would take some work, obviously, to get it going, but nonetheless, all the equipment's in place. It's all intact. It's in good condition. It's all being covered, and the tailings facility is also fully permitted. Plus, it contains from the historic mining, some low grade material that actually could be reprocessed in the tailings as well.
Okay. I guess you were very optimistic about South Cassiar, based on what you do assume that South Cassiar might hide some reasonable deposit size of high grades. So I guess we can kind of summarize what you were saying.
Absolutely, yeah. So in that area, as mentioned, because of the flat lying geology and some of the rocks are unfavorable for vein mineralization and the mafic volcanics are favorable, of course, where areas are covered by the unfavorable rocks, there's been pretty much no exploration. And there are areas where we see veins extending under those, or where we see areas where we have sets of veins which essentially are form these parallel sets with a periodicity going north and south, which then would extend underneath those areas. So we have that good potential. We also have the stacking of the mineralization between the different rock units. So as we saw in the main mine, that's demonstrated there. And as we see in the Lucky prospect down to Taurus, we see that as well. Over and over on the property, we see the stacking, where there'll be veins in one unit separated by a gap where we have a weaker rock unit, and then more veins pick up below. And none of that's been tested for in most prospects in the South Cassiar area.
What's the internal estimate for 2020 drilling results? It's been stated that it would be 50% at 0.7 gram cutoff. Would it be at peers average cutoff being 0.4 cutoff?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding what that question's asking. Are you talking about
What
upgrading
cutoff are you going to use? And
for
what is the internal estimate for your 2020 drilling results?
Are you talking, is that question directed to upgrading the Taurus deposit?
It's a
I,
standalone
I,
question. So
I think what the question is looking for is, what we think is the impact of the 2020 drilling on the resource, and I guess what would be the cutoff grade that would make sense to use in the future.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of parameters to consider there. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done on the economics of this still. And if you're blending high grade with the lower grade resource, that obviously changes your potential for lower cutoff grades as well at Taurus. So I think that's a bit of a premature question, because there's a lot of things to go through before that. And we have the very high potential, obviously, of upgrading all these resources and adding to them. And I think, that's the kind of number that we have to look at, I think, once we have a better idea of what kind of resources we can define in other areas. This is more of an economic question at that stage.
what geophysical methods have been used and will be used in finalizing the drill targets?
There's various different IP, for example, is being used in some areas here with mixed success. When we have a flat-lying sequence of rocks with graphitic rocks that are in there, of course, it affects the IP, but you can see, for example, in the Taurus deposit, some of the corridors. But one of the ways that we were looking at geophysics here is not necessarily to define directly the veins, but to define those offsets of the rock units that tell us where the veins are. So geophysically, you can use things like seismic to potentially look at that, look at the flat-lying sedimentary units and their contacts with the mafic volcanics to see where those offsets are that might tell us where veins are. So you can use techniques like that. Again, the flat-lying stratigraphy makes it a little difficult to apply some techniques in this area. And we have a very already target-rich environment. So geophysics is something I think we could apply as we gain more knowledge in certain areas. But at the moment, we have a lot to work with without even using geophysics at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, just maybe if you can, well, I guess so I have a question around sort of last time we were talking, or last time you were on the program, where we kind of mentioned some of the relogging and the historical drill hole data, and kind of you're working through that stuff. Can you just give us an update on where you are on working through the historical data?
Absolutely. We've got a very talented geological team who are doing a very good job of looking at the distribution of mineralization of all these areas, trying to pull apart internally, for example, in Taurus, where the high grade areas are and how to target those. And then once the opportunity gets to be on site, there's a lot of historical drill core, some of which needs salvaging, but other core which is more recent, which is in good condition, which can be re-looked at to really try and come up with a very good geological model to target some of these areas. Because again, we're looking for things like the stacking of those rock units, so defining those contacts very clearly, and looking for offsets in those contacts become very important tools. We're looking for alteration, where we have those ultramafic units, for example, that host some of the shear zones. They don't host the veins, but they host the shear zones. When they're close to veins, they become altered to that greenish fuchsitic carbonate alteration. That's the listwanite that I showed you earlier. So when you're getting the listwanite, you are often close to where you're going to get veins. So you can use some of these tools in alteration, tracking out the corridors of alteration in the deposits themselves, tracking the densities of veins within the Taurus deposit, for example, and tracking out some of the structures in Taurus, for example, that also are the shear zones that control the continuity higher grade. So some of that will take higher densities of drilling, but if you do to bring the resource to higher levels, but if you can do this geology and look at the geology in a very detailed way, you can actually decrease, of course, the amount of drilling you need to do, because you increase the confidence in the continuity of mineralization through the better geological understanding. And there's also a lot of surface mapping that can be done in this area to upgrade some of the historical mapping.
So where would you say you are, in terms of a percentage, of that sort of that last comment you made around, having a full understanding so that you can, reduce the quantity of drilling, I guess, to be more effective in this, in your drill programs?
Well, it's all incremental, of course. You can't take it all on at once, because it's a big job to do that. So the idea is to go into areas like Taurus, like the area around the main mine and Cusack, and work outward from those zones. And so take the knowledge internal to them, first work on those, because it's direct application, obviously, to exploration targeting, but then to move outward from those areas. So one of the first things this summer will be to look at the Taurus deposit and pull out historical core from there to really try and track out the mineralized corridors there. Some of this has been done to some degree in the past, but we're really taking a fresh look at it, and really trying to, when you have a lot of geologists like historically on the project here, you often get good work done, but sometimes it's inconsistent work. And so really it's normalizing everything and making sure it's consistent so you can correlate things. So So I think as the drilling program proceeds, that will occur in tandem with the drilling program, and the drill holes can be modified as that knowledge locations can be modified as the knowledge is gained, and each drill hole obviously provides additional knowledge in that, which then can be fluidly updated in the models to move forward.
Got it. Thank you. And then you mentioned during the presentation beta hunt and some other analogies. Can you just remind us sort of the deposit types, and do you see any other in the region analogies, examples?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, for the region, some of the analogies are the Sheep Creek camp, which produced 700,000 ounces of gold in southern BC, but also the Barkerville District. And Barkerville, as you know, has now a significant resource at it. The orientations of veins at Barkerville are very similar to what we see here. It's the same kind of geological controls. The host rocks are a little different. They're mainly sediments there, but it's the same style of controls. A lot of the mineralization at Barkerville tends to occur in the more coarser grained and competent sandy units between some of these sedimentary horizons, forming these sets of veins which do exactly what we see here, which form along these lineations, stepping to the northward and forming these long plunging zones, which you can track out over long areas where you have vein after vein repeating. And so Barkerville is probably our closest analogy in British Columbia. Moving further afield, as you mentioned, in some of the older deposits globally, like Beta Hunt in the St. Ives district in Western Australia, it's the same type of pattern there. The Beta Hunt mine is in this gently dipping stratigraphy of mafic and ultramafic rocks, and the veins splay off the ultramafics into the mafics, and that's where you get some very, very high grades at that interface. And some other analogies too, you could, for example, with Taurus, particularly Taurus West with the shear zone there. In New Zealand, we have the Macrace deposit, and Macrace is a low-grade bulk style tonnage deposit, which is being mined a combination of open pit and underground, and has, again, similar sort of geometry to some parts of the Taurus deposit with some disseminated and veinlet mineralization styles. So there's an analogy there as well in a producing operation as to the geometry and the grade. And OceanaGold is producing at the Macrace deposit underground at grades of about 1 gram per ton in bulk zones. So if you have obviously the continuity of mineralization and the ground conditions, which you would have good ground conditions here too, you have the potential for even underground mining of some of this material if you can get continuity to it.
Thank you. It's very helpful. And just one my last question, just to discuss the mill. There's been a bunch of questions over the period here about the mill. I mean, how do you see it in terms of your future? Is this something that is useful, or just going to have to be completely sort of refurbed, reworked, and redone, or is the circuit still something that could be sort of bolted on to the eventual new mine plan?
I believe it could be bolted onto a new mine plan, even if you were to build a new mill in this area for the bulk of Taurus. Remember, a lot of the gold mineralization here is in very high grade veins. And if you get very, very high grades, you want to have a mill with a good gravity circuit and obviously recover the gold dominantly by gravity. So having that additional option for a focused high grade mill is an excellent one if you encounter extreme high grades in some parts of these vein systems. And in the short term, to your question as well, it also depends if there's a good exploration success in the South Cassiar area with high grade veins, then having this mill provides the potential for very near term production to help obviously fund the company, but also to produce some pretty good return on a very high grade areas that have such as been mined historically, as well as the potential for reprocessing of some of the tailings there. So the mill, I think, has both in the short term for high grade targets and potentially even in the long term has a potential benefit even with the larger conceived operation if you wanted to have a specific high grade facility as part of your larger milling complex. And as you can see with the topography There is a lot of ease in building mine infrastructure here. It's not a problem. You can easily build very well away from any waterways or other features here. There's a lot of room here. So, so it provides a really good logistical environment for this infrastructure.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
What are your some infrastructure needs as you progress the exploration?
In the initial stages, the infrastructure needs obviously are fairly small. You can see the road network on the map in front of you there, which provides access to all different areas. So that's a huge advantage because obviously permitting roads into new areas can take time and requires a lot of environmental impact assessment and minimizing disturbance. So we already have all that infrastructure there, so that's very important. The other advantage of infrastructure, certainly in the South Cassiar area, is the presence of those underground workings, which have portals in all of those areas with the crosses you see on the map here, which are in areas of underground mining that were mined as in the 1980s and 1990s. These are modern sized declines, which could be easily rehabilitated. The Cusack and Bain were both, well, Bain was open 10 years ago and Cusack was being dewatered. The main mine, a portal here, goes into the hillside. It's self-draining. It was checked out 10 years ago. People walked along. It could easily rehabilitated, and you could put underground rigs if needed in some of these areas if you have provided ventilation and obviously some rehabilitation of any areas that are problematic. But these areas of underground are in good condition, so provide already good access infrastructure to both exploration and potential near-term production. If you found parallel veins, you could just drive in and extend the underground workings into those areas. And then the road system goes right down to the mill. So there's very good infrastructure already in place in South Cassiar. Obviously in the North Cassiar area, we were looking more at the bulk tonnage situation there. That would require obviously mine design and permitting in there through there. But access wise, again, in the meantime, we have very good access to be able to explore that area, and already a long baseline too, from an environmental sense of bringing this project forward.
What are the historical tailings? What are they telling to you? And I'm wondering if they are giving you any tips for the exploration.
Well, I guess obviously the tips is that you don't want to lose 3 grams per ton material into your tailings if you can. So so it shows us what type of material, and some of that would have been probably lost due to the need for a finer grind in the milling cycle. But the tailings also provide the opportunity for reprocessing, as I mentioned. There's, you know, I think there's been a resource, Marco. Was there a resource on the tailings historically?
I'm not sure if there was a resource, but I know they were drilled, and maybe it was a historical resource. Maybe it's just a good amount of drilling where they estimate that the grade is between 1 and 1.25 grams per ton.
There you go. So it's a little bit lower than I anticipated. But I know that that when I was up there with Hawthorne, we were finding areas of 3 gram material in there, but overall it's probably going to average a little lower. So the one potential there is to identify areas within the tailings that might be higher grade for reprocessing. It's not going to be a huge amount of gold, but it's enough that it could provide you, funding for exploration or other aspects there. But certainly, in some of these areas, if you were to build a new mill in through here, you would try and again go for the finer grind to make sure that you wouldn't lose less of the tailings in those stages.
Thank you, Campbell.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have just a few more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. Always get this question: are you considering partnering with a major to fast track and all that, or anyway, what's the current sentiment on that sort of thing?
Marco, I think that's a question for you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And I'll also throw in, can you comment on your institutional ownership to date and percentage, and do you want more?
Absolutely. So institutional ownership, I can tell you, is just over 23%. So it's quite healthy. We've been building it up quite steadily over the last few months or year. Sorry, what was the first question?
Just partnering with a major,
Oh,
or
the majors.
or
Yes.
getting them as a cornerstone investor. I guess I saw ask it the other day. Got Yamana. So
Yeah, no, I did saw that. I did see that. There's actually a lot of action all over BC, and not only BC, in Canada as well. So actually, the number of independently owned plus million ounce deposits is coming down that are available. So yes, in a nutshell, yes, we would be open to partnering up. I think it all depends on on having the right partner and having the right deal. We are tremendously undervalued right now. So but yes, we will be open to that, and actually we are have several conversations ongoing and are reaching out to more companies. And we'll certainly entertain such a scenario for sure.
excellent. Want to thank everyone for tuning in. We'll be queuing you for feedback. Please share your feedback. It'll get to the team very quickly. And this event will be available in about an hour at amvestcapital.com/webinars, and go to the replay section. And with that, I'll bring it back to you guys. I always ask, why buy now? So I think it's going to be a really exciting summer, sort of a real summer for a lot of properties. So why buy now in mid-April?
Yeah, I guess I mean one is we have the drilling season coming soon. They've described a little bit of the infrastructure, the foundational resource that we have, the potential that we have for exploration, and the type of targets that we have basically too many. Or more than we can chew. So this is going to be a very exciting summer. We are quite undervalued. And I think it's a very, very attractive opportunity. Insiders are buying and been buying steadily over the last few months, and that says a lot, I guess. So yeah, that there's a lot of it's going to be a few months full of very exciting drill results and catalysts that they've told you a little bit about the potential of our property. It's really exciting, and don't wait too long. You don't know where the price might be next month.
I like that. All right, thank you, everybody, and till we meet again. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Campbell. Thank you, Dave.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks.